emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and,
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 088.PS5502, certificate number 34995. Aztec Death Whistles.
So that you're hearing is the sound of a Mesoamerican death whistle. That's hollow, screaming sound. What do you think?
Well, that's terrible. That's a terrible sound.
0 out of 10 stars.
I don't like.
Would not hear again.
I don't like hearing it.
Is it worse than the show that started with like 8 minutes of chewing?
No, because a lot of that chewing was in support of my overall love of chewing and of chewing sounds.
You're so ASMR about chewing that you outvoted all the misophonic people who did not want to hear the chewing sounds.
No, our wonderful editor Mark Miles has been doing the show now for a while, and has become
almost a year.
Yeah, has become an integral member of the team, and is making a lot of executive decisions about the
number of chewing sounds.
Yeah, the tone
in
and
each show.
timbre of the show, and I support all of his decisions.
Let's give him a window right here, Mark. If you'd like to put in any chewing into the show, this is the place to do it. Everyone who does not want to hear the chewing sounds should hit the little skip button.
Don't do it, Mark. But I'm fairly confident that screaming whistle was not Mark Miles's choice, but in fact something you sent him to illustrate the topic of the show. Another Mesoamerican artifact. What's going on here?
Another? What do you mean another one?
Well, in addition to the ball game, the Mesoamerican ball game.
It's true.
Our second Mesoamerican.
In just a few months.
That's right.
This is our second Mayan/Aztec omnibus.
It's almost as though we have themes on this show. I feel like I'm going to do some kind of 80s pop cultural reference next.
Whoa.
I know.
Watch the fans faint in shock.
Buckle up. Another aviation adjacent.
I guess it didn't even occur to me. This topic was actually a listener suggestion from our friend Pablo.
Oh, hello, Pablo. Thank you.
Do you remember Pablo?
Of course I do.
We sang happy birthday to his daughter at the live show here at Town Hall in Seattle.
That's right.
Like the day before coronavirus started.
That's right.
That was the show that gave everyone coronavirus.
Very gracious people, Pablo and his daughter.
They were lovely.
Yeah.
And then we actually chatted with them. He's a Patreon donor at such a level that we hang out with him.
Yes, that's right. But definitely a Patreon donor at such a level that we will do a show at his recommendation.
Yes.
This isn't just like we met a guy and he was nice.
He was so cool that he starts slipping us topics.
That happens all the time. People are like, hey, we were hanging out. I've got a great idea for a topic. And it's like, well, topics are reserved for Patreon donors.
I have a special pen, the ballpoint pen that doesn't write, that I can use to pretend to jot down show ideas when people who are not giving at the appropriate Patreon tier try to suggest one.
Coffee is for closers. Show topics are for Patreon donors.
I do give everybody a set of steak knives if they don't get their topic on the show. Pablo requested Aztec death whistles, and he's the first person ever to suggest a show topic where he also offered to have his daughter 3D print for us the subject of the show, which I think should be the new requirement. We will do your show topic
if you
have a son or daughter who will 3D print the topic. Like if you want us to do Grant's Tomb,
right?
We're going to need a 3D printed
1-to-1 scale.
Yes. If you want Generalissimo Francisco Franco on the show, We need him 3D printed for us.
My next episode actually is going to be on some of the world's largest ships.
Oh,
and
wow.
I would like those. Well, I came up with the topic, so it's a missed opportunity.
You're going to have to
for
3D
me.
print.
I'm going to have to have my daughter 3D printed. She's going to have to put down her Star Wars figures for 3 seconds to learn how to use a 3D printer.
She was doing math workbooks. You have no faith that she's actually doing the math workbooks.
No. She's good. When you say do your math workbooks, she rolls her eyes and she says "nee" at you half a dozen times, but then she does it.
She doesn't switch back to her new collection of Phantom Menace action figures.
No. Oh, I screwed up so badly. I thought that. So what I've been doing is buying Star Wars action figures online. And
this is your new brand. After your tweet went viral.
I buy them by lot. I go on and say Star Wars action figures lot. And, sometimes I'll get 50 of them at a time in a basket, but I don't know half of these things. They're just like, that guy's on the Jedi Council. He looks like a cartoon devil.
Half of them are G.I. Joes.
Right.
You have no idea.
And there were a couple of those that I was like, is this some kind of transformer? This can't possibly be but they all are. She's got a book that has all the characters. So I'm flipping through
Well, she knows immediately.
Yeah, she does.
She's going to be like, well, that's Newt Gunray,
Yeah,
Dad.
she's like, that's Gorb Glinglang. And I'm like, Gorb Glinglang? Ugh. But one of the things was I was convinced I had Anakin's mom. I had Padme, and I recognized Padme, but there was another lady that I was sure it was Anakin's mom, because Marlon was always talking about Anakin's mom.
Really?
For some reason, Anakin's mom figures pretty largely in her cosmology.
Well, you know why?
Why?
Because there's no women in Star Wars.
Right,
But
right.
famously, Star Wars is a universe with one female character.
So, and never passes the Bechdel test, right? But Anakin's mom. So I had Anakin's mom. So what I do is every night I go and I put one Phantom Menace era, started at the start. I started with little Anakin.
This is something I could do to punish my kids. If one Phantom Menace supporting character showed up in there at the foot of their bed every night.
So, the first Anakin was like holding her bag of, holding the edge of her little bag of bagels that she has one every morning. And then throughout the course of the last several months, like little Star Wars figures holding on to light switches, and they appear in the house.
And I talked to her, and she thinks her mom is doing it.
Well, I know that's.
Do you feel like you're missing out on the credit?
No, that's perfect. I always want to be. I always want people to come to me, right?
You want to be working. You want to be working in the shadows.
That's right. Because then she'll come to me and confide. She's like, I think Mom is like. She hasn't given me one in a couple of days. I think that something, she'll come up with some theory about it. And I'm like, wow, okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. Your mom's very unpredictable. But I put out Anakin's mom all excited about it. And when she found her in the morning, she was like, another Padme. And I was like, how is that another Padme? And she's like, oh, well, see, this is the outfit that Padme wore when she went to visit Anakin in his little hovel.
She's like a queen. She's gonna have the right outfit in her right. shiny Naboo spaceship.
But why are the people who are making these figurines making a Padme for every outfit? But I can't seem to find an Anakin's mom to save my life.
Is there a Shmi Skywalker?
I have no idea.
She's played by one of Ingmar Bergman's favorite stage actresses, Pernilla August.
Well,
is there a Shmi? I can't find one. Anyway,
but I've gone a little crazy. I have like 150 of these things in the waiting.
Yes, there is one. Here's one on eBay for $8. Should I just get it right now?
Well, I don't know. What does it look like? Does she look like another Padme, or how do you?
Well, she is kind of wearing a nondescript dress. It's kind of darker greenish gray than Padme in Tatooine gear.
Is she wearing sandals?
Can't really tell. Looks like no.
Because I have another figure that's wearing sandals, and I was like, is this a Padme too? And Marlo's mom was like, I don't know. I think that might be Leia on some like later episode. And I'm just like, this is too confusing.
I do remember. I assume it's because they know they'll sell more Lukes and Hans and Padmes than Gorb Glinglang. Who did you say?
Gorb Glinglang.
And who is Gorb Glinglang again in the trilogy?
He's on the Jedi Council, but he.
Is he the weird one with two heads or whatever?
Right. He's got
one head named Gling and one named
mouths.
Glang.
He opens his mouth and another mouth comes out.
No one wants that. So when I had a full set of Kenner Star Wars action figures as a kid. It would always be, here's Luke in Tatooine garb, Luke in Bespin fatigues. I still remember the name of the outfits.
Wow.
Luke in X-Wing pilot. And I would see him in the movie and I'd be like, oh, hey, Luke's got his Bespin fatigues on. In fact, he wears his Bespin fatigues on Dagobah too. They're not really Bespin fatigues, but I always thought of them as his Bespin fatigues.
Sure,
That's
Bespin fatigues.
And right now, I mean, some days I get up and I look in my closet and I think, what to wear today?
Why don't I have Bespin fatigues?
Where's my Bespin fatigues? I have Bespin fatigue from this conversation.
I want a figure. I want figures to play with, right? And so to have multiple Lukes would be confusing for me as a person.
Well, if it was a Barbie, you could switch out the outfits,
right?
But all these have molded plastic outfits
plastic
that are part of them. So,
but she seems to be okay with having two Padmes. I think she presses the one Padme into service as Anakin's mom, quite frankly. But if you talk
that's
to
messed
her,
up.
I know.
That's
if you talk to her about it,
breastfeed me
though,
like you did by the lake on Naboo.
Mm-hmm. If you ask her, she wants to get it right, so she's gonna tell you that they're both Padmes. But I watch her. I know what she's doing.
In all the Phantom Menace, I assume that's not by design. That's just what there is a glut of on the internet.
No, I don't know how much time you spend on eBay.
Zero time.
I
just looked up Shmi Skywalker.
You can learn so much about people on eBay, but one of the things you can learn is by Googling or by searching for Star Wars action figures lot. You can see what really matters to some people. And there are people that have like 40 stormtroopers, and there are people that have one of everything. And
I think there might be a particular glut of Phantom Menace era, though, because that was the first time Star Wars action figures had appeared on shelves in 20 years. And I think all these
people
Gen X kids went crazy.
Yeah.
Except now they cost $9 instead of, when I was a kid, as low as $1.95 if you can get them at Jafco.
Sure.
Ralph's Toys at the mall, they were $5. I wasn't doing that.
No. You're not going to go all the way to Ralph's anyway. Was that Ralph's at Northgate?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's nice to go look through, but then you order from the Sears catalog.
Exactly. Yeah. Or you go to Fred Meyer, where they're like pretty reliably $2 to $3 if it's 1981. So we think the listener should be 3D printing you a Shmi Skywalker. That's what we've come around to.
Listen, if there are futurelings in the distant future who are sentient Star Wars action figures, please forgive me for having conflated or
I'm sorry we insulted your Bespin fatigues. You look lovely.
Right. You do look lovely. If there are futurelings in the past who have like a giant bin of Star Wars stuff and they're like, I don't know what to do with this, send it to us at Omnibus at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155.
And that concludes Aztec Death Whistles, entry 088. I think you asked me for my Star Wars action figures, and my wife already gave them away. She sent them to Goodwill.
That's one of the more tragic stories I've heard from you. Generally, when I ask you about stories of your life, they always you stick the landing in most cases. They
end with a plucky young protagonist making good.
That's exactly right. You never have a story about like, well, and then I just had to like reconcile myself to the fact that I would never have the use of that finger again. You're like you always Encyclopedia Brown your way out of whatever problem it is. But this one where you were like, yeah, I had a life, my basically, my life home of Star Wars figures that I'd spent my whole life collecting.
My life home? Is that like a Wookiee word or something?
Some of them worth money, you said. That was the real tragedy of it.
Yeah, I had very little sentimental attachment, but I was always telling my wife, hey, I got to get rid of these. And in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to get rid of them by reselling them on the internet.
Yeah, taking them down to Comic-Con.
And what she is hearing is, hey, the next time you go to Goodwill, take all this stuff.
How many figurines did you have?
I had given some to my nephew, I remember. But when I found a new batch, and it had some of the last batch of Return of the Jedi figures that are now worth like $100 each.
Wow.
Even though they are not MIB, as we say, mint in box.
Did you have Obi-Wan where the tip of his lightsaber hadn't been bitten off?
No, those things broke so fast. The shortest unit of time is between a kid receiving a Star Wars action figure and losing the gun, or the little lightsaber that comes out of Obi-Wan's wrist. Because you remember it had the little groove in his forearm where you could...
The first thing I did was bite the little tip off of those. I did it as soon as I opened them off the box.
The cape only lasts 6 minutes after that. The cape shortly gets shredded.
Yeah.
I had a Darth Vader where I popped off the head and my dad glued it back on, but he could no longer turn his head. But does Darth Vader really have to turn his head that much? It's
kind of like real Vader. Vader can't turn his head all the way
Is he
around.
like one of these guys who turns his whole body when he has to move? Like
somebody that had a couple of vertebra fused.
Yeah, like a guy in a... So we're going to get a bunch of... How many Shmi Skywalkers are we going to get in the mail now?
Well, I'm not
8 to 10?
I'm not just looking for Shmi Skywalkers, of course, if you have other things. Like she said the other day, she's like, I think I need a blaster. And I was like, what do you need a blaster for? She's like, well, blasting. So
Blasting stormtroopers.
And, like I used to have a blaster. I used to have, my Han Solo blaster did triple duty. I used that thing not just when I was playing Star Wars. That was like...
Was that also your all-purpose cowboy gun?
Yeah, and like spy gun.
Sidearm.
World War II gun.
Was it like a loophole? Your parents wouldn't buy you guns, but they'd buy you a blaster?
No, my mom was a early 70s progressive and refused to buy me guns, so I made guns out of everything.
Yeah.
Driftwood and stone and scabetti and whatever. So eventually they relented. I would go to Fred Meyer and get my own guns.
Do you think today you can?
Yeah. Well, I did then too.
Do you think Pablo is going to cancel his Patreon donation now that we just talked about Star Wars toys for the first half of his Aztec Death Whistle show?
Pablo's probably sitting forward in his chair.
He's hanging in there.
He's like,
they're going to get back to it. I believe in these guys.
Aztec Death Whistles. Aztec Death Whistles.
It didn't even occur to me that we had done the Mesoamerican ball game.
Oh, when you agreed to do this?
Yeah. This is all, I mean, it's not that I don't have a new Mexican restaurant I'm promoting, if that's what you're asking.
Ken's Hacienda.
Come down to Ken's Rainforest Cafe.
I have to imagine though that, the Mayan and Aztec culture is tantalizing to us both because it's a North American culture that we have all these wonderful sites, all this iconography,
Star Wars adjacent, by the way. The first Rebel base is a Mayan temple.
That's right. And it's so evocative. It feels like we have so many stories kind of from both sides of that first contact between the cultures. But we also know so little about what the culture was. There's not really a Rosetta Stone.
And as we mentioned, that's our own fault. Our being European colonizers.
Right.
The Spaniards burned everything. They didn't want us to know about the Mayans and the Aztecs. And that's a lack of confidence. If you really think your brand of Iberian Catholicism is better than a civilization, you don't have to burn their codices.
No.
You're going to win the culture war on the merits.
Sure, bring their books out, lay them out for all to see.
Look at this. Look at these dummies with their Jaguar God. You don't want that, do you? Who wants a Jaguar God? Everybody's like, oh, I kind of want a Jaguar God.
Actually, that seems kind of better than this other thing. So I feel like the omnibus needs to spend a little bit of time dealing with...
And if we're talking about stuff that went down the memory hole, I mean, the Mayan and Aztec empires, obviously, the giant tantalizing temples are still there in the jungle, but we don't know anything about the people who lived there.
Well, the thing about the omnibus, right? We're trying to get things through the aperture of the next apocalypse, but the Aztec Death Whistle has already gone through an aperture of a past apocalypse. We need to give it a boost to get it through the next hole. Would you say
it's more important to double boost something like that as opposed to 70s Kellogg's breakfast mascots or whatever we're worried about losing?
Well, because time is a flat circle, I imagine that futurelings are going to make very little distinction between the Noid and an Aztec Death Whistle, right? It's like, oh, that all happened back in...
They won't even remember. They'll get it confused. Oh yeah, Tlaloc the Rain God. That's from Fruity Pebbles commercials.
Yeah, he was like the guy. He was the guy from New Coke, right? I mean, in the same way that we compressed 3,000 years of Egyptian history into just sort of like, oh, it was just sort of Egyptiana.
We do it for like the early 20th century, honestly. Anything before you were born is like, oh yeah, that was just all one big time.
Sure, the flappers there during World War II.
Flappers and Beatles, you know, all that stuff. Yeah. When you talk about Aztec whistles making it through the memory hole, they have in our time, but just barely. They're a case of a comeback, like what would it be in terms of, in biology, it would be like a Lazarus taxon.
Oh, sure, a Lazarus taxon.
Something that's thought to be extinct and then comes back on the scene. This is the power of the internet, is that stuff can be resurrected and become such a craze that Pablo's daughter will be 3D printing it, even though it had been forgotten and sitting in dusty museums and warehouses for centuries.
So you mean this is like discovering a clam that everyone thought had been extinct for 10 million years? Or is this a thing where someone was going through a government warehouse and found the Ark of the Covenant?
I guess it's more like the dusty government warehouse, because the archaeologists had been duly collecting just thousands of aerophones, wind instruments, from Mesoamerican people, from
Flutes.
Aztecs and Mayans. Yeah, they're all very elaborate. They're some of them are flute-like. They have some have finger holes, like a flute or an ocarina. Some even have a fipple. Do you ever like to put your lips on a fipple?
Well, I don't know. I've never fippled.
Naughty boy. Do you like fippling? Do you know what a fipple is?
Wasn't Mr. Fipple the one that kept squeezing the Charmin?
It's Mr. Whipple. Whipple. A fipple is the thing on a wind instrument, like a recorder or like one of those tin flutes that's kind of transverse, like it's as you put it in your mouth, it's the horizontal mouthpiece.
Yeah, got it.
So
how do I not know that term? I'm a renowned flautist.
Yeah, you always play the rock flute in a lot of your work, right?
But I guess not the recorder. I'm more of a purist.
Wait, is there any woodwind instrument on any
Long Winter's record?
On any Long Winter's record?
Well, sure. I mean, we have.
Is there clarinet?
There's quite a bit of saxophone.
Oh, that's right. There is saxophone.
Saxophone.
That's a reed instrument.
Yeah,
we'll count that. So the Mayans and the Aztecs made very unusual whistles and whistle-adjacent resonators. An aerophone is one of the four big categories of musical instruments, something that's made by the movement of air, basically. And in rare cases, the air can be outside the instrument. Like, have you ever seen an Australian bull roarer?
Yeah.
So the air that's making the noise is not contained within. It's actually moving through the air in that case. It's a guy spinning it.
So is a didgeridoo an aerophone?
Yeah, but that's the normal kind where it's a resonator. The air is inside the instrument.
Is a let's see, what are some other aerophones?
A kazoo is a kind of aerophone called a membranophone, I believe, which means it kind of has that buzzy, shaky thing. The sound does not come by the air going through a tube. It's the air, jiggling something.
Yeah, I
jiggleophone.
I often would play a comb and a piece of paper, and that to get that kind of like horn sound. I forget what songs I would do that, but there was always a song in a
like the edge of a piece of paper. Are you doing?
No, you take a just your typical hair comb, and you lay a piece of paper across the front of it and then blow through it, and you get that resonance of the rattle. So a bagpipe is an aerophone?
Oh, I'm wrong. A membranophone, according to the Hornbostel Sax system of musical instruments, which we all know and love.
Yes.
The membranophone is actually separate from aerophones. You'd think that kazoos and, say, recorders would be in the same group, but they're not, because the sound does not come from the air through the passage. It comes from the buzzing of the thing. Kazoos are in the same group with kettle drums, interestingly.
That is interesting.
So the Spaniards reported that they would see the Aztecs blowing just hundreds of whistles at the same time, making just this crazy cacophony for ritual purposes that the Spaniards didn't write down, didn't care to understand.
So you wouldn't listen to it and think that it was musical so much as it was just phonical.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. We have these things because they sat in, there's thousands of them in museums, but we don't know how they work. There's a mechanical engineer. The serious study of them didn't begin until around 2000. So in this millennium, a mechanical engineer named Roberto Velasquez Cabrera started collecting hundreds of these whistles or replicas of them. But the problem is, he'd make copies. The problem is then you have to figure out how to play them.
Right.
Like in one case, he spent a year with this frog-shaped whistle trying to figure out what noise an Aztec or a Mayan would have got out of this thing.
Can you imagine sitting around the living room and this is your dad, and he's just you're watching TV, and he's got this little frog. How do you know you get it right?
Exactly. The Mayans lost the instructions, right? It's like losing your
or the Spanish did.
Losing your Han Solo blaster. Yeah, maybe the Spaniards burned the instructions. It was all oral knowledge, and nobody remembered how to play these things. And they all have many of them have crazy shapes. There's one called, if you've ever been to Teotihuacan in the Aztec site near Mexico City, you will hear what sounds like jaguar roaring. Or if you're one of the YouTubers that I looked up recording this happening, jaguars.
Jaguars.
They always say jaguars.
Good old jaguars.
On YouTube.
Is that just a YouTube thing? Like it's a barrier to entry? If you don't say jaguar,
I don't think it's an affectation like Soviet.
Jaguar. It's not an affectation. Soviet. There ought to have been an L.
I think people actually think it's pronounced jaguar.
Jaguar.
Like they're wired up. Maybe those are robot jaguars.
Do you say jaguar?
I do not. I say jaguar.
Jaguar.
I don't think that's right.
Have these people never heard of the Jaguar car?
I know.
What do they call it?
Do they call the car a jaguar?
Jaguar.
Maybe. That's a good question. Maybe they think there's two. The jaguar is the car. The jaguar is the instrument.
Jaguar.
Anyway, you'll hear this roaring sound, and if you're alarmed, your guide will explain, no, that's just one of the hundreds of vendors here. One of the knickknacks they try to sell you are these little carved jaguar heads.
Don't be alarmed now. It's just a jaguar for the May Queen.
in your
in your hedgerow.
In your hedgerow, in your pyramid row. If you blow this thing, let's listen to a jaguar whistle.
Roar. That sounds convincingly like a wild cat in the night.
It sounds exactly like a wildcat, and you kind of make the rumble. I'm watching the guy's fingers. He's got his hands on a couple of the holes, and his mouth up against. It's not a fipple, but whatever the mouth aperture is, and you can see him to make it go from to rah. He kind of flares his hand out, like opening up.
Sure, like
the way a harmonica player would. You know?
Right. He's using a mute on his trumpet.
Yeah, basically the hand is a mute. So when you mute it, it makes the low jaguar rumble, and when you really want it to kind of screech, you move your hand. But it's amazing. That's some of these are as old as I think like 400 BC.
Wow.
And they're doing better animal impressions than anybody
sure,
today.
than all the animal impression horns that we were building in the 50s.
Yeah, I just realized I didn't have an end for that sentence. I was thinking of some animal impressionist guy in a vaudeville act or something.
We can put a man on the moon, but we can't make a whistle that sounds like a jaguar.
There's some thought that maybe these were used as lures. Right. Because it's total. The question, as we'll see, is totally open as to what these things were used for. Because again, Spanish bonfires.
But it also feels like there's a lot of Aztec culture that, at least from our perspective, without the instruction manuals, seems just designed to scare the shit out of people.
That's probably literally a big part of. I mean, it's not brown sound. It's not literally going to scare the poop out of them.
Right.
But a lot of the speculation about these whistles is what is the effect on the listener, and that's especially true of the most famous of these resonators, which is now often sold under the name of death whistle, either Aztec or Mayan death whistle. It often looks like a little skull.
Yeah.
The one you may have seen, the one that Pablo's daughter 3D printed for us, looks like a little skull.
Right.
Sometimes they look like owls, which I thought you would enjoy.
Yes, I do enjoy an owl.
Don't you think that owls are the spookiest of the
birds? Yeah, baby owls especially. Very spooky.
Don't you have a thing about owls? Oh, you want to hug them. What is it you want to do? You want to sleep on them?
No, owls appear in my room sometime in the middle of the night,
right.
disguised as pillows.
You get alien abductions.
Yeah.
But they're disguised as pillows. You do want to sleep on them.
They're soft.
What you really want is to sleep on a puffy owl.
Yeah, it's their beaks and their big spooky eyes are discomfiting.
You just want to turn that side down. Yeah. And you just hope that owls can't turn their head all the way around.
Wait. Ouch!
They can!
Little downy owl baby pillow. I would sleep on a jaguar, frankly, if it was tame.
It's declawed?
Well, or tame.
Is there such a thing as a tame jaguar?
I don't think
like
so.
Siegfried and Roy thought they were doing great.
There's a tame impala.
Would you sleep on it?
We
Would you
toured
sleep
with
on a
them.
tame impala? But you didn't sleep on them. They probably had their own bus.
Yeah, they did.
The opening act always sleeps on top of the...
Ken, we've been talking for a while about having more merchandise available for futurelings.
We have had really good intentions about that, I would say, for years.
And a lot of futurelings want to rep the show. They want to be out there in their own communities saying, Omnibus, yo, Omnibus. And we've been forcing them to make their own T-shirts and hats.
They have to put signs on their backs that say, Omnibus, ask me how.
That's right. They spray paint Omnibus on their computer terminals or laptops, and their coworkers used to say, "What's that mean?" And now they just have Omnibus-themed Zoom backgrounds.
All that is about to change. We are finally getting serious about shirts with other merch TK in time for the holidays.
That's right. We've partnered with our friends at Meh to design not just 2 new T-shirts, but 2 new T-shirt designs every month going forward.
In October, we are starting out with the Omnibus and Futurelings shirt designs that longtime fans may remember from the last time we got our act together, well over, a year and a half ago.
I don't remember those T-shirt designs. Can you refresh my memory?
One of them says Omnibus in the yellow logo, kind of
That's
distressed looking on black. It's cool.
That's cool.
The other one says Futureling with a series of possible... listener forelimbs, claws and tentacles and robot hands.
Those are great. And I know a lot of
in.
people that didn't get a chance to get those shirts when they were originally available have asked for reprints. So that's nice.
So those are coming back on mediocrity.com/omnibus. That's MEDIOCRITEE, mediocrity with a TEE at the end. Courtesy of our friend Dave at Meh, who owns my styrofoam head and made us tell stories about our childhoods.
So these new shirts, this first run of shirts will be available until November 1st, at which point a new run of shirts will be available. So that's just in time for the holiday season.
These are soft, high-quality shirts available in sizes small through triple XL for women, quadruple XL for men. They are great-looking shirts. The Futureling shirt is drawn by me personally. I mean, not each one. I don't have that kind of time.
No, but I remember you submitting that design to me and me going, yeah,
whatever. Stop talking to me about stuff.
Sure. Can't you see I'm busy? And then the other one is our famous Omnibus Fallout Shelter logo.
So head on over to mediocrity. That's MEDIOCRITE.com/omnibus and check out the new designs all October, and then with more to come every month going forward. So the Mesoamericans must have thought that the owl was also a scary
Yeah, I think it is.
shape or organism.
I mean, when you think about you've been to Mesoamerica.
Yeah, maybe that's why we're doing all these shows. I'm like the kid that goes to Europe once as an exchange student and then
speaks with a French accent for the next year.
For the rest of the semester.
But you know, the kind of quality that the undergrowth has there, where I think even probably when there were massive cities in the Yucatan, they probably were always pushing the flora back constantly. You know, the jungle there is...
The flora won, by the way.
The flora did.
There's whole
eventually.
temples you can't even see because they're under triangular mounds of earth and vines and flowers.
But there's a curious quality to that underbrush, which is just like it's impenetrable and it's inexorable. You know, it just is.
You can't see far enough ahead to know if there's nothing that will kill you, and there probably are things that will kill you.
Right, and so I don't want to. I'm trying not to like orientalize in the sense of saying like it's spooky. It's a spooky country, but if you think about a rainforest or a forest that has like many tiers where the tallest trees are very tall, and then there are vines and there's underbrush, and you know it's like a very diverse environment. You don't think of it as quite as spooky as that kind of Mayan, like where the brush really has its own. It feels like it almost has an intelligence.
It just occurred to me now that of all the animals that do spooky screams, most of them are jungle animals, right? It's monkeys up in the canopy. It's parrots and other kinds of tropical birds.
There's a lot of screaming in the jungle.
All the blood-curdling animals are jungle, and they're not the dangerous ones, right? Like, you'd think that
Crocodile is just going to wait in silence.
Yeah, all the things that kill you are going to be pretty quiet.
In the north, we have howling wolves and coyotes, which are spooky sounding.
That's true.
But like a bear isn't scary. Isn't spooky sounding. It's scary. But if you heard a bear roar,
a bear's like a fun, friendly sound until it kills you.
Hey, grunter, what's up, big pig?
So I wonder if the screaming animals of Mesoamerica are some of the inspiration for because you heard that sound it made. It's eerie. It's unearthly. It sounds enough like a scream for it to be human, but then it's in some kind of uncanny valley between human and ghostly, or it's a zombie sound, really.
Yeah, that death whistle is in that place where you're like, is that a woman screaming and should I call the police, or is that...
It could be a nature sound, right? It could be wind whistling through something.
Right. In our context, it could also be somebody whose starter it needs to be replaced.
That's probably not what the Mayans thought.
No, that's right. They're like, God, get a new starter for your Ford.
When you see, Velasquez, is that his name? Yes, I was just guessing. Well, Velasquez has shown cross sections of these resonators, and in fact, the multiple complicated chambers seem like they're a real engineering feat. They're a feat of science and musicianship to make something sound like that. And some people have said it's not unreminiscent of the way the human larynx looks in cross section. Like and I guess for various reasons, maybe the Mayans would have been able to study the human throat, or the Aztecs.
Went through a period where they were cutting people directly in half.
Yeah, once you've done that once, you're like, hey, I wonder if I can make my whistle look like that. And so it kind of duplicates these human sounds.
Were these whistles always recognized as whistles, or did they go through a long period where they sat in museums as artifacts and nobody realized they were meant to be played?
I think people knew they were whistles. They've got the mouth aperture, and most of them have finger holes. So I think people would have just, by the hollow shape, but people did not think of them as serious artifacts. You're right. People were like, oh, we've got these toys.
Oh, toys.
We'll just put these with the other goofy rock on a string, that we found. And nobody really took them seriously. But in fact, now that there's been some study of them, there's tons of theories about what these might have meant to the Mayans. And it's not just children's toys at all. One other thing about why the sound is so disturbing, I guess those are the highest frequencies the human ear can even hear.
Whoa.
So they seem whoa. Is that a Mayan death whistle? The Mayan death whistle of our times is Seattle Police Department. Sorry.
We're not sure what they're for. We hear them sometimes. Very spooky.
So what are they for? The Spanish said they saw hundreds of Mayans playing whistles at the same time. And so it's possible they were, we just heard a police siren. It's possible they were crowd control. They were the equivalent of modern sonic warfare. They would be used in war to intimidate an enemy.
Interesting.
And that's something that we did a whole entry about military applications of sonic technology, right?
Well, and we didn't even really get into thinking about sound as psychological warfare in prehistoric times, or in, even the bagpipe is meant to spook your enemy. I think primarily, if men are mustering on the opposite hillside and all of a sudden,
do you think that's true? Do you think even the Scots know that's kind of a scary? Then why do they do it at like funerals and receptions and ceremonies?
Well, then it became sentimental.
It caught on.
But I bet you if you were facing a bunch of like guys holding swords, and that was the sound that accompanied them. I mean, that's what bugles are all about, right? We use bugles to signal all kinds of fun things now, but they were always meant as like, here we come.
Yeah, it's true. The trumpet goes back to biblical times or beyond. The trumpet is an intimidating sound. And I guess you could also use it to signal to others on your side, right? It does have a tactical purpose.
And a bagpipe, I think you can hear at great distance because it it's making sound across the whole.
You see a bunch of guys
spectrum.
with no pants, and you're like, we got these guys. And then they start making this banshee dirge.
Right.
And you're like, oh no.
Their faces are all painted.
They know something we don't know. That's why they're not wearing pants. And I guess we talked about this as well, making Noriega listen to AC/DC or whatever. There's still a modern kind of psyops component to scary sounds.
And the way that those sounds, like they enable one person to sound like either many people or to sound like a thing much bigger than themselves.
Or in the case of AC/DC, 4 people.
It sounds like 4, but 4 very small people in the case of AC/DC.
In the case of Bon Scott.
The tallest member of AC/DC is 5'2".
Have you heard about, did we talk about this in the Brown Sound episode, this invention called the mosquito? The legality is being hotly contested, mostly in EU jurisdictions where they're legally ahead of us. It's the thing that convenience store owners play outside their store, like a kind of a high-pitched buzzing sound that teen ears can hear and be annoyed by, but beat-up middle-aged ears like ours have lost that frequency.
Really?
So regular shoppers will just walk right in, but the unruly teens who might be sauntering and loitering outside, trying to get somebody to buy them Rolling Rock or whatever, they are like, what is that? Do you guys hear that?
Well, you remember the McDonald's here on 3rd and Pine?
Crackdonald's? It's the internet calls it?
Yeah, Crackdonald's. For a long time, about 10 years ago, the managers were playing just hardcore country out front in an attempt to drive away the
homeless people. Hate country music. We all know.
Homeless people and unruly teens who congregate out in front of that McDonald's. They were just playing straight George Strait.
Straight.
Old straight George Strait, they call him. And I don't think that it cleared people out. I think it just annoyed everybody.
Because where else are you going to go?
It's not that bad. George Strait is great.
There's a visual equivalent where they have some kind of wavelength of blue light that makes it less pleasant to hang out there. I think, you and your friends kind of look ugly. And if you're an insecure teen, you don't like the color that shows every blemish on your skin, right?
Right.
Have you heard about this?
No, but I can totally see it.
You're like, if I owned a 7-Eleven,
well, but
it's like the color of the blue Slurpee.
All of those things like completely miss how resilient teens are.
Right.
If what they want to do is hang out in front of a place.
It underestimates both how oblivious they are.
Right.
Many will not even notice, but also how stubborn they are. Like if they sense they're not wanted, that's like catnip.
Oblivious and stubborn. Those are basically the defining characteristics of being a teen.
Those are the two kinds of teens there are.
Yeah. All you can do is, I don't think there's anything you can do.
By the way, I was reading a thing about how color temperature of light is very culture dependent.
I read that too.
Did you see that?
Yeah.
Where was that?
Well, people were talking about our light bulb episode and saying, someone on the Facebook page said that what we think of as warm light,
kind of an orangish tone,
right, is in many cultures, it's the bluer light that is considered more homey and comfortable.
Why? Why is a blue light cozy?
I don't know, but
you think I think we're right. It's the firelight of the hearth.
His example, or whose ever example it was on the page, was saying that sometimes you'll go into a Middle Eastern restaurant and it feels like the light is just completely like cranked blue. Aggressive light. Your
gyro is like a weird color that doesn't even look like meat, and you get it to go.
Yeah, and he and our correspondent was saying like this is actually a cultural difference, and from the perspective of the people that run the restaurant, that is what is considered like inviting, and
that makes sense. I'm going to walk back my cultural chauvinism. If it's a desert culture, they're going to associate a bright, blown out yellow-orange light with the trackless desert. When you get to your home, you're going to want cool blue shadows, right?
Cool blue shadows.
That totally makes sense.
Sure, it's cool blue shadows versus like crackling fire in a hearth.
If you're from Denmark, you need to get away from the blue icy outside, and you want the warm light of your stove.
Whoa, where is the research paper on this?
So it's possible that, so we talked about the psychological effect. It may have been used in war. But there's an even weirder effect you get if you play more than one of these death whistles at once. It's maybe it's not unlike the resonances we saw when we talked about Tuvan throat singing in the omnibus. You remember you would play two tones and kind of a third tone would appear.
Yeah.
I guess there's an effect like that where phantom wavelengths will appear. Like the vibrations will interact in such a way that you'll get these phantom notes that are in neither whistle. And if those notes are coming in an infrasonic range, like kind of below what the ear can consciously hear, there are starting to be people researching what the effect is on the psyche. Like, do you get altered conscious? Like, I think they're seeing evidence of altered consciousness, like people seeing and thinking weird things.
Interesting.
The heart rate will alter. So it's possible that this was used medically to treat illness by Mesoamerican peoples, or maybe like to induce some kind of trance or dream state for mystical experience, which is not what I get when my kids are blowing on some irritating wind instrument. Like if I go to a third grade recorder concert, which I've had to do for two different generations of kids.
Ouch.
You do hear two recorders playing, and they are not playing the same note usually.
Not anywhere close.
But I do not get any kind of cool infrasonic, like orchids don't open in my consciousness and send me down a path of discovery to the jaguar god.
You know, we all in modern times have so many ways of altering our consciousness that we're not even really aware that that's what we're doing. All you have to do is go downstairs and turn on your TV, and you are transported to a place that no prehistoric person would have had access.
That's disappointing to me that we think about how cool it is to go into a trance state, but really I have it every time I pull out my phone.
Yeah, 600 times a day. So any kind of pre-industrial society, you would be looking for those transportive opportunities. And
if that's as close as you can get.
I mean, how many senses are there, depending on whether you believe in extra senses? There are, I always forget, 70 senses.
There's the usual 5.
Okay, so 5, right. I knew it was between 5 and 70.
Well, we've talked about this before. There are kind of dozens of others. The perception of pain is not the same as touch.
Right.
Knowing where all your limbs are, like proprioception.
Umami.
There's umami for sure. Like knowing how your hand, knowing the rich meaty taste of your hand without even having to look at it or lick it. But yes, there's a small number of senses.
And to overload one with like waves and waves of
I'm just jealous
sound.
Of a brain that's so fresh and untroubled by civilization, like an ancient Mayan, that you could be wowed by a whistle.
I think
play that frog whistle again, man. That was good.
I think that it's when I was a teenager, I would put on "She's So Heavy" by the Beatles and close my eyes because I sensed in that particular recording.
It's a menacing guitar, right?
Yeah, and just the static that kind of is brought into the
right at the end it comes up.
That there was that I could feel that was doing something to me. It was taking me somewhere. And it's why I like My Bloody Valentine and the late sort of 80s Cure, all that shoegaze stuff where the volume and the amount of static that's in the track does sort of transport you.
But they didn't have the Cocteau Twins.
They didn't have the Cocteau Twins. They had to make it with little skull whistles.
That's funny. I was going to ask about this same thing. If there are, because it's debatable whether we should consider this as music or not. Once we learn that it's got all these other applications in war and peace and medicine and whatnot. But are there musical sounds today that have that same kind of scary quality? I immediately thought of kind of that ominous shoegazy buzz.
Yeah. I mean, distortion, absolutely. But if you think about all industrial music.
Yeah.
And
I was kind of thinking about distorted Sonic Youth guitar, like when you've got Thurston and Ronaldo playing at the same time, or
right.
I guess that's
two different tunings.
Same as two different recorders.
But now with electronic music, you can make stuff that you can make sound anything like anything you want, right? And we understand the difference between a different sine waves and synthesizer people are monkeying with stuff.
So we could make only pleasing sounds. We could make only pleasant, reassuring sounds. But just like the Mayans and the Aztecs, we want aggressive. We want screams and wails and ghosts.
Right. And what we do in recorded music is overlay sounds with other sounds. It's just if you want to listen to Jewel play her acoustic guitar on a beach, you have that option, but Most recorded music,
if you're willing to pay her cameo fee.
most recorded music now is multi-tracked layers and layers and layers and layers of sound. And it sounds like that's what they're doing here. 50 people playing a little skull.
And producing kind of complicated, by overlaying sounds, you're kind of overlaying whatever the simple reflexive emotional response in the brain is. So it produces either complicated emotions or the illusion of complicated emotions, depending on your theory of consciousness, I guess.
And if it's producing phantom tones, it's absolutely producing phantom melody, because your brain is going to put melody in.
I hear melody in my white noise machine.
Yeah.
I noticed the other night, as I turned my head, I could get different sounds out of my white noise machine. And this is as close as I get to mushrooms, because I'm so straight edge. But like I was noticing, like some of the stuff I was hearing was in like weird time signatures.
Yeah.
Like I could get 5/4 and 7/4 out of my white noise machine just by tipping my head.
Your brain will absolutely do that. If you put 4 sounds together, you're going to pick out a tune.
We only have one known case of a death whistle being found in its archaeological context, and it gives us a clue as to what at least the Aztecs used these whistles for, these aerophones for. In 1999, there's a district of Mexico City called Tlatelolco, which I think today is most famous for the namesake riots that happened there right before the '68 Olympics. This often happens when the eyes of the world are on a city or people. You get activism, and in this case, the Mexican government, I think, just shot hundreds of people. So Tlatelolco means something to Mexican activists, but there's a large-scale Aztec ruin there as well. And in 1999, they were excavating a temple to Ejecatl. I'm sure you know this, but Ejecatl is the Aztec god of wind.
Oh,
and
sure.
You were just going to say that.
Yeah, I was going to say god of wind, yeah.
Yeah, Lord of the Night Wind. In the hand of one of the skeletons unearthed, who had been a 20-year-old who had been sacrificed.
An actual skeleton, not a statue of a skeleton.
Right. Not a 3D printed skeleton by Pablo's daughter. In its hand, it's clutching a death whistle. And so now we have a very close connection between the Mesoamerican practices of human sacrifice and the death whistles.
We know that the death whistle was something that humans held.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we're onto something.
Well, and a human that was being sacrificed.
Right. Okay.
So it's got ritual purpose, and it's in the temple of the wind, right? The wind god. There's also a Spanish account of how, a youth from the Aztecs would be chosen, and for 1 year would be feted as the Lord of the Night Wind, and he would have all the pomp and the ceremony of that god, and take on its attributes and wear its makeup and robes and whatnot. And then at the end of the year, he would be symbolically sacrificed. So it wasn't just sacrificing your enemy. It was, we're going to appease the gods by, for whatever reason, reenacting their stories and then sending them on to the next world.
It's a advanced sort of Rumspringa.
It's a permanent Rumspringa.
You get 1 year to be a god, and then
is that a Weird Al record? Permanent Rumspringa. And the wind is actually, and because it's the wind god, you can understand why whistles, breath would have been particularly symbolic to them. And maybe that explains kind of the weird howling sound if we're supposed to associate it with a wind god. I was reading about the Aztec underworld, Mictlan, and wind is actually part of the story there. So I wonder if that's what happens there. So Mictlan is a 9-leveled underworld where the Aztecs believe most of the dead were headed.
That's interesting. Just
same as Dante, you mean?
Yeah, just 9 levels apparently is what human beings.
Well, isn't that what if somebody just asked you?
How many levels does hell have?
Unawares. Yeah. Hey, how many levels do you think would be in hell?
9.
You'd probably be like 9, right?
Right.
It's just the natural answer.
Sure.
If you want to go to Mictlan, what you need is a yellow dog. You need to follow a yellow dog.
Follow a yellow dog.
Here's what happens.
There's so many There's so many good band names in this episode. I'm just like, I can't keep up. Okay, you need a yellow dog.
You need to go to the temple of the dog. Here's what happens. If you find the yellow dog will get you across the 9 rivers. If you find a white dog, he will tell you, I can't take you across the river. I'm just washed off and I'm nice and clean. And
you need a dirty dog is what they're saying.
But not too dirty. The black dog will tell you, if I take the river, it'll wash off my black stain. A yellow dog is just dirty enough.
So to get to the 9 levels of the underworld, you have to go across 9 rivers, and each level of the underworld is separated by a river?
Apparently.
I see.
Which doesn't make sense. You would think rivers would not be a good vertical divider.
No, right. But as you go down, but there are a lot of cenotes in this part of the world.
Sure.
So as you go down, there are rivers. There are under rivers.
Hell is a cenote. That's what I've always said.
There you go.
In fact, they would bury people with a yellow dog just to make sure they had a guide if you were a wealthy Aztec. And they would bury you with a Mexican hairless. Like
Is this like finding a white rooster?
they didn't call them Mexican hairlesses. They would just call them hairlesses. Mictlan it's not a nice underworld. There was kind of an eagle jaguar heaven for brave warriors, like a Valhalla type of place, but that was very limited. Most everybody else just went down to hang out with the rotting Lord of the Dead, who's gross. He's always drinking pus from human skulls.
That's terrible.
You get food there, but it's like a parody of good Mexican food. Like it's cantina food, but like the tamales are full of beetles. Instead, you think that you get a scoop of frijoles, but it's actually going to be like bloody human heart tissue.
Why do you want this? You don't want to go to this place.
The garnishes are not the radishes there. It's actually like prickly poppies. Yeah, it's not fun. And then there's a list of each of the 9 levels has an obstacle. Burning deserts, freezing gorges, and a lot of them are there's a terrible blue lizard, and a jaguar will eat your heart. Cliffs crash onto you like earthquakes, but many of them are wind related, like wind blowing knives at you, spinning through the air.
Right.
Just wind knocking you around the
you see
cavern.
That in Alaska, the knife wind.
Are there actual knives?
Yeah, ice knives.
You have to climb a mountain of razor sharp obsidian while these gale force winds pummel you.
Why are you trying to get across the 9 rivers? Does it get better or does it just get worse?
You're trying to get to Mictlantecuhtli's throne. He's the god of the dead. But when you get there, your reward for braving all these awful punishments is non-existence. You disappear into nothingness.
Sounds better than any other option offered.
That's what you want.
Yeah. Just like, get me to nowhere.
You're like, put me in my mushroom silo, or I can't remember, wherever it is you want to be buried.
Uh-huh.
And I just want sweet bliss. No obsidian sharded anything, please.
No.
So the death whistles may make that windy whistling sound specifically to convey what awaits the Aztec
Follow
beyond
the yellow brick dog, as you said.
But it's not a hopeful sound, basically.
Well, it's your only option. I'm hearing either you're one of a very few that goes to Eagle Valhalla, or you're one of everyone else who's consigned to one of the 9 levels of the underworld, and only the very, very fewest of those can brave every like pus skull
and get back to zero.
Get back to nothing.
Yeah, which is the goal.
Wow,
it's kind of the goal of podcasting, right? Like, just try to get back to nothing. Don't do anything so annoying that anybody hits. Don't do loud chewing noises.
All this wind. And that concludes Aztec Death Whistles, entry 088.PS5502, certificate number 34995, in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, talk about a mighty wind.
Oh shoot! We didn't play the video of. Pablo actually sent us video of the whistle they made, and his was a little less scary.
Oh,
it sounds a little something like this. So his was not quite as scary.
No, but not meant to be as scary. It's more of a it's
a fun death whistle.
It's an evolution.
It's more of an afternoon death whistle. It's a brunch death whistle.
Afternoon death whistle.
So thank you for sending us that video.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Pablo. Thank you, and Pablo's wonderful daughter.
We'll put it up on the Patreon.
You can go to our social media sites and almost certainly hear a discussion about death whistles and probably innumerable examples of fan-made death whistles, because if I know Futurelings, I know that Pablo is not the only one who has 3D printed a death whistle.
You'll probably hear complaints about various sounds we made during the last hour, intentionally or not.
That's right.
You can find a list of the counts of times our chairs squeaked.
Yes, there is an entire Twitter feed that is just devoted to counting the squeaks.
Do you think at what point will your chair have more Twitter followers than you? Are you worried about this eventuality?
I am.
You got to do more Star Wars jokes.
I do. I got retweeted by Judd Apatow yesterday.
You did?
Yeah.
What did you say that was Jedworthy? I don't think I was on Twitter.
Oh, I was just, as we're recording this episode, there's a resurgence of protests in Portland because the federal government decided...
Because they sent in the secret police.
Yeah, they sent in completely untrained, like, border patrol desk jockeys.
In Enterprise rental cars.
And they underestimated the degree to which the entire nation of Portland would respond, kind of like teenagers that cannot be driven away from the front of your marketplace.
If there's one thing I know about the current administration, they are oblivious and they are stubborn.
They're oblivious and stubborn, but also people from Oregon are not oblivious, but very stubborn.
That's true.
And I think the Trump administration thought that Portland was being plagued by a small handful of skateboarding
terrorists,
Antifa terrorists, and what they didn't realize is that everyone in Portland is basically they will become a skateboarding Antifa terrorist if you give them any excuse, right? If you give them a reason to band together, they will, and they have. And so I was tweeting in support of that, just saying, Portland gets a lot of teasing for being.
Oh, right, for the unicycles. I saw your tweet.
For being what it is, which is a ridiculous place.
People out walking their ferrets.
But the thing about it is that underneath that ridiculous affectation, it's actually a northwestern place with a lot of grit and a lot of determination, and don't mess with us up here.
Yeah, we're pioneer people. We want to be left alone.
Nobody messes with Portland more than I do, but when the chips are down, Portland and Seattle will.
They're casting with their fellow Cascadians.
Yeah, we're Cascadians, and we're not going to screw around. You notice from the way the protests take shape out here in Seattle and Portland, it's not like other places. We don't go home. That's the sad thing about us, or the great thing.
We don't want the reassuring orange light of our dens.
Anyway, so for whatever reason, Judd Apatow was made aware of it, and then gave me a signal boost. Of course, that tweet, with all its many thousands of faves, still does not have the number of faves that any remark you make about Tootsie Rolls
At the same
gets.
time, I was like, might have tomato soup and a grilled cheese for lunch.
Don't know.
8,000 likes.
Can't decide. And that is the nature of my existence, I'm afraid.
No, your Twitter is beloved. You guys should follow John at John Roderick.
Oh, that's nice.
And unfollow the chair squeak one. You don't want the John's chair to get more.
I think the chair squeak one is great because it's.
Are they going to count these intentional squeaks you're doing? You're working the refs here.
I think so.
Look what you're doing.
The thing is that I don't think that the chair squeak Twitter time codes each individual squeak.
But they're ever running total. Are they going to count that as one, or is that 8?
That's I'm not in charge of it. So
it's up to the judges.
You can go to Ken Jennings if you want to be part of the mass happening that it is faving Ken's tweets.
If you want to be if you want to watch Will and Grace, go to @Ken Jennings. But if you want the cool stuff.
Yeah, if you want to go to the underground theater that's happening in a black box somewhere where the bathrooms smell like bleach, you can go to @John Roderick.
That's the Largo.
That's right. And also Instagram, et cetera. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com.
It's not The Omnibus Project, is it? Oh, it is.
theomnibusproject@gmail.com is our email address.
That's annoying to me that we couldn't get Omnibus Project.
Well, it is to me too, but some two dinglings in the UK who had a show that had 4 listeners got that email address back in 1994.
Did I tell you I have a shot at getting kenjennings.com without the hyphen back?
Oh, who has it now?
I think I've said this before. This guy who ran for Florida state senator or something 20 years ago.
And then never tweeted again.
Yeah, and Wood doesn't want it. It's just some alt-text GeoCities page, basically. And
it's a .com.
Yes, he has Ken Jennings ***. He has everything.
Wow.
And that's why I had to settle for a hyphen.
How are you going to do? Have you made an arrangement with his estate?
I have found a hitman. To go to the boat where this guy lives.
Don't talk about that on the show.
No, from what I can tell, he has let the site expire for reasons of his own. But
I thought when that happened that they just went into a netherworld forever.
I think there's an auction period. And I'm saying this now because I will know the results by the time this show enters the time capsule. But I have made a bid for kenjennings.com. And I don't do eBay, but the thing I will bid on, I won't bid on little plastic Shmi Skywalkers, but I will bid on my own name as a .com.
How exciting. And then what are some of the other Ken Jenningses that are out there that are under his umbrella that you might want to swoop in and get?
Do you think, which ones should I get? Should I get .org?
Do you have Ken Jennings at Gmail? I mean, I don't.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Right? Yeah, I mean, .org, .ru, .sex.
All the URLs, I don't know if he has .sex. But
it didn't exist.
I've often said that .sex will never be a 3-letter domain because some people will pronounce it .sex.
Oh.
You don't like that?
That's the kind of thing that you get 1 million likes on your Twitter, and you really should get arrested. If I were in charge.
He has .org, .net, .biz.
He does.
Should I get KenJennings.biz?
KenJennings.biz. What would we put up there?
.cc. I'm going to sell my 3D printed...
Your plaster caster?
No, I'm going to make whistles that sound like a Jeopardy buzzer. That's a sound people like.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't like it, but I do like the discussion that is probably going to result from this conversation over at the Omnibus Futurelings Facebook page and on the Omnibus Futurelings Reddit and TikTok and Scarb Blang and Icky Icky Doodle Wah and all the other great social media sites that have sprung up since this episode aired.
I'm sure TikTok will have been banned by the time they hear this.
You can mail us Star Wars figurines and death whistles and whatever else you have that you want to get out. Oh, I got an email from somebody that said that they had their grandfather's like very, very questionable artifact from like a racist past, and they didn't want it.
I bet your eyes lit up.
They didn't want it in their house, and they didn't want to throw it away, and they were asking me if there was a museum that I could recommend that wanted it, and I said, I guarantee 100% there is not a museum that wants your granddad's.
Did they say what the item was?
Yeah, they did.
You don't want to.
I'm not going to reveal it. No, I'm not going to out them too far.
Will you tell me later?
Yeah, I'll tell you later.
Okay.
But I did say I will care for this forbidden item in a way that that doesn't exploit it and never lets it fall into the wrong hands. I never heard back. I think they may have either. Oh, because I offered them the other choice, which was that they should destroy it. They should take it to the Mountain of Doom and throw it into the fire. Those are the two options. Either destroy it and let it be gone from the world, or entrust it to me.
And they didn't want either one.
Well, who knows? They may have destroyed it. They may have actually fallen into the.
Oh yeah, maybe they never
Doom.
made it back. Maybe they got attacked by orcs on the way
right.
on the way to Orid Ruin.
And so, or maybe it's in the mail on its way to me. I don't know. So if you want to send us stuff, your great grandfather's old racist materials, which I only mention because people have sent me some very questionable things they didn't know what to do with.
What do you do with them? It does kind of raise that question.
I just put them in my temple to racism that I'm building. I'm building in the basement. It's a sub layer, a sub level. It's the 8th level of hell here at the Omnibus Bunker.
I'm looking at the mail right now. Did you read the address? I guess you already read it earlier.
No, the address is P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
Our friend John must have recalled the episode on George Bush's crack dealer because he sent us a button he saw for sale.
Oh,
that says George H.W. Bush, America's favorite crack dealer, and he's holding up the bag of crack. It spells America with 3 Ks, which I feel like we haven't done in a while.
America KK.
What happened to that? It's like Chuck D was not supportive enough of that, and then we stopped doing it. I think we need to bring it back. America.
It kind of goes along with the Bart Simpson, the like black Bart Simpson T-shirts, the triple extra large ones where it's like it's a black thing you don't understand T-shirts. America.
Am I not allowed to say America? Is that appropriation?
No, I don't think so.
I shouldn't say it.
I think that pin belongs on a denim jacket. From like 1991.
John says he's getting a master's in tax accounting, and he liked the Onion Futures episode. And in fact, he wants more shows about market crashes.
Okay.
He said we should do the one where, you remember when crude oil was trading like negative briefly at the beginning of coronavirus?
Yeah, that was good.
Thank you, John. That's a good idea. And thank you for the button. I'll put it on my denim jacket.
And then finally, if you would like to support the show with a financial contribution, we encourage it and greatly appreciate it. We've given some teasers about some of the benefits that you can accrue to yourself by supporting the show.
Like we'll talk about your 3D printer for like an hour.
Including, mentioning you and your daughter and your 3D printed skull whistle in an episode. But also you have access to a show that we do every month where we cover the addenda. People write in and say, actually at us, and we take them seriously.
We could call the show Errata.
Yeah.
But that would sound like erotica.
We could do an erotica show.
Yeah, that's for...
If you donate at the $100 level, we will send you a monthly copy of our erotica show.
But it's all just chewing sounds. Nobody wants it.
But that's at patreon.com/omnibus project. And, we say it, but I need to reaffirm it that your support of the show at Patreon has been a great help to us and it's a great joy.
It's really the only reason this show exists right now, I think. Like the odds that we would be doing the show right now if Patreon had not swooped in to save it are, vanishingly small. I don't see how that would have happened.
Yeah, it would have been hard to have overcome the obstacles that we managed to overcome if it hadn't been for you, the listener.
That sounds like we're patting ourselves on the back a little. All those obstacles.
Well, but we spent a year in
limbo. In Mixlon.
In a pretty bad limbo.
In Mixlon.
A limbo where every week we didn't know what the next week was going to be like.
And there was always some executive type drinking pus out of a skull.
It was terrible. But now look at us.
Take a look at me now.
We're in the weird eagle Valhalla that only a very few...
A small number of podcasting warriors made it. Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived before we all headed either to Mictlan or Eagle Valhalla. We hope and pray that the catastrophe that ends it all may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.